Hello my lovelies, welcome back to my channel. Happy belated Disability Pride Month. So if you weren't aware, July was Disability Pride Month and I want to talk about it for the next few videos. I have this video and then we're going to talk about another video about what is Disability Pride overall. But today I wanted to talk about what is Disability Pride Month. I saw a lot of organizations, companies, celebrating Disability Pride Month. However, I didn't see a lot of recognition of what the history behind Disability Pride Month actually is. So today, I kind of wanted to outline what is Disability Pride Month, where is it coming from, and kind of the impact it has on our communities. If you're new to my channel, my name is Isa and I am a disabled advocate and writer. I recently graduated with my master's in communication studies with a focus in disability culture and identity, and I'm currently a Disney College program participant, which is why my chaos is irregular on this channel. However, I'm very excited to share this subject with you. I've only learned a lot about this the last 2 years, so it's super exciting, super important disability history. So let's jump in. This year we got to see a lot of recognition for Disability Pride Month, particularly talking about celebrating access. However, I really want to highlight community aspects that stem from our community history that doesn't actually get talked about a lot. But before I do that, I want to address kind of the elephant in the room that a lot of people have when hearing the concept of Disability Pride Month. And that is that Disability Pride Month comes right off the heels of LGBTQ plus Pride Month. Now, I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding that Disability Pride Month was not created to co-opt pride movements. Instead, it was born from a celebration of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed in 1990 in July. So that's particularly what the date is about. But it's also to celebrate disability as one aspect of a stigmatized identity that all individuals participate in. Disability is not limited to any particular group and affects all people, not even equally, because other stigmatized identities, so the more other stigmatized identities you have, the more likely you are to become disabled due to that stigma discrimination as such. And I think this idea is really well defined in Stacey Melbourne's essay in Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. And she talked about this conversation she had with her friends, where her friends explained that we should consider that the reason to add disability justice to social justice is not because it's another element of diversity or representation, but rather because disability justice and disability itself has the potential to fundamentally transform everything we think about in terms of quality of life, purpose, work, relationships, and belonging. So disability is one lens to view pride, diversity, representation. However, it is not limited to just itself. It is deeply interwoven and interconnected into other pride groups. Individuals with intersectional marginalized identities are the ones who translate pride, translate advocacy across the groups, particularly from or for people with disabilities. So I just wanted to clarify that so we understand Disability Pride Month's history as coming from the Americans with Disabilities Act, but also not negating or co-opting any other pride movement, that they should be seen as connecting months that celebrate different aspects of an individual's lived experiences. This year, we got to celebrate 32 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, like I said before, we don't know a lot of the history. If you haven't checked out the Netflix documentary Crip Camp, I strongly recommend it. Watching it was absolutely phenomenal, and this is where a lot of the history that I've done a little bit more deep diving into it. But if you want a really great explanation of the work that was put in to get to the Americans with Disabilities Act, I strongly recommend that documentary. Until then, here's kind of a brief synopsis. So there's really two big events that comes into the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there's lots of different things, lots of different advocates who are working towards it for a really long time. But the big historical events I want to talk about when we talk about disability pride, things that I am particularly just amazed by my disabled ancestors, as Stacey Melbourne explains in her essay mentioned earlier, is the 504 sit-in and the Capitol crawl. The 504 sit-in was a record-breaking sit-in with 150 disability advocates who sat in a San Francisco federal building for 25 days. The sit-in occurred to advocate for Section 504, an anti-discrimination clause to be added to the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. It stated that no otherwise qualified handicapped individuals should be excluded from participation, be denied benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal assistance or federal financial assistance. So what this means is that people with disabilities could not be discriminated against in federally funded programs, allowing individuals to have better access. Section 504 was very instrumental in leading up to the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act. So what's really, really, really cool about the 504 sit-in is that it was led by people with disabilities and it was supported by people with disabilities, and there's a lot of support swapping happening within the individuals who are staying in the building. People with disabilities were accommodating each other, helping each other make sure that there was a translator, making sure that there were resources and medications and people weren't getting bed sores, and really bonding together to support each other as a community. And they did have aides there, but they also helped each other. And I think this is something that we really need to acknowledge more in disability history, as we largely talk about those who have helped people with disabilities, their aides, their support systems. However, we rarely talk about how the disability community has been a support system for each other, that we use support swapping, that we use other things, that we fill in each other's kind of needs so that we balance each other out and help each other. And that's exactly what happened during the 504 sit-in. What's other really, really important aspect that is hardly ever talked about is that the Black Panther Party supported the 504 sit-in by supplying hot meals every day to the protesters. This partnership would not have occurred had it not been for Brad Lumix, who was a disabled advocate, who was a founding member of the Washington chapter of the Black Panther Party. He played a very big role in connecting the 504 sit-in advocates and protesters to the Black Panther Party and creating this connection and supporting one another through this advocacy. This is what I mean when I say that we need to celebrate the Americans with Disability Act, celebrate Disability Pride Month from the perspective of community when talking about history, talking about the individuals who made it possible, talking about all of the work that was put in and is continued to be put in by disabled advocates every single day. Every single person who's been part of that resistance in every single way. And it's such a big part of the way that we think about disability that's not acknowledged largely is that community aspect, because so often we're focused on these individual accommodations and individual access needs that we don't look at the larger community and the way that we connect with one another and have communication networks. The next major event that I want to talk about is the Capitol Crawl. Now, the Capitol Crawl occurred in the early 1990s in order to advocate for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which passed in July of 1990. So what happened during the Capitol Crawl is demonstrators came to the White House, they were chanting, they marched from the White House to the Capitol. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever been to the Capitol. I recently was in Washington, D.C., and I've known about the Capitol Crawl. However, I didn't realize, I don't know what I thought, but I didn't realize how many steps were there, because what these disabled advocates did is 60 individuals who were mobility aid users set aside their mobility aids, got out of their wheelchairs, and climbed the Capitol steps. What's really, really cool about this is that the advocates and organizers made sure that they wanted to be very specific in the way that they represented what they were trying to say. Because what they did is they wanted to make sure that it was seen as a form of empowerment. They wanted to make sure that it was seen as a very visible representation of how the United States was inaccessible, and represent the way that individuals with disabilities can and would advocate for themselves, which gets really interesting when we talk about an 8-year-old who was put all across media when talking about the Capitol Crawl. Jennifer Keelan Chaffins had been a disabled advocate since she was 6 years old, and she was 8 when this happened, and she was really wanting to participate. But she said that the organizers and advocates were a little bit nervous about her age, first of all, and that second of all, they didn't want all of the media to be there to end up pitying her and instilling this message of pity rather than empowerment. However, Jennifer insisted that she get to be able to participate and said, and I get a little teary-eyed about this almost every time. Even though I was quite young, I realized that as one of the very few kids that got to be involved in this movement, it wasn't just about myself, it was about all of them as well. I was born 8 years later, and it's just incredible to me to think about the people who put in all of this work to make sure that the world is going to be accessible for kids like me. And a lot of times when we talk about disabilities, we think about so often adults with disabilities, people who became disabled later in life, which is a very important community to recognize. But I have a specific tenderness for people who grew up disabled because that was my experience. And I have a particular passion for young disabled people. And it's because of things like this. It's because of the work that was put in to make sure that even though I've had inaccessibility in my life and I've constantly have had to fight for access, fight schools and programs and places, that the Americans with Disability Act made that fight only easier for me and made it possible in general. And that's the thing, made it possible for me to have those fights in the places that I grew up, in the school that I went to, that weren't already accommodating for people with disabilities. And I think that is just phenomenal. And that's why I want to talk about these events. That's why when we talk about Disability Pride Month, I think it's really important that we address the history of it in addition to the concepts of pride, because these things are so foundational to our community and a lot of us don't even realize it. So if you want to learn more about disability history, disability experience, I strongly recommend at least 2 things. First off is going to be Crip Camp on Netflix, incredible documentary featuring Judy Human, who is one of the biggest disability advocates during this whole process. And then the second form of media is a book called Disability Visibility, which was edited by Alice Wong and is a collection of essays from people with disabilities from various life backgrounds and experiences, and they all talk about something different. And Alice Wong in the beginning talks about how this isn't supposed to tell like this is the story of disabled people, but rather this is the story of people with disabilities as a community, and to say that we are all very unique and we have our own unique experiences. And I think it's just phenomenal that is part of our story. And Stacey Melbourne talks about in her essay, and I'm going to talk about this in my next video, about the concept of Crip ancestors. And I do believe that it is, and that our Crip ancestors are everyone that came before us, everyone who fought for us, and it is the individuals who were part of these protests, who made it possible, who fought for us, who showed us what advocacy could look like, that I'm able to be the disabled advocate I am today. So when you think about Disability Pride Month, I want you to think about these things. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below. If you like videos like this, I talk about disability concepts all the time. If you're here for the Disney College Program stuff, I will be posting things eventually. I just need to organize my thoughts and my time. It's been a mess, but I will see you real soon and have a great week.